Hi. Well, there's no time like the present. Let's get started. It is early. It is 6:08. I got on my clock on November 18th. My name is Larry Cedar, and I'm back with you for another session on scanning, spelled Sqanning. Now, there's no such word as scanning. It's a reference to the actual word scanning, Scanning, as in scanning the body. Scanning is a relaxation technique which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension, to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. Now, I've been doing these sessions, for years now, and I haven't been back online for a while because I've been busy with stuff, but I finally got a clearing here, and I thought, let's get started again. If you've seen one session, you've seen them all. They're basically all the same. I do these sessions to reinforce the technique. I do it myself every day, at least an hour a day. It's sort of my life mission. I really believe in the technique. I believe that the advantages it holds for us mentally, physically, and emotionally. So let's just get started. Again, scanning is the relaxation technique which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. So the incremental release of muscular tension, what does that mean? Make a fist tight, and on my count, just release it. 3, 2, 1, release. Do it again. Make a fist. 3, 2, 1, and release. Take a deep breath. So you've already started down the path to scanning. All these ideas which I teach are based on the theories of a man named Thaddeus Golas, Golas, and he wrote a book called The Lazy Man's Guide to Enlightenment. It's a very thin 70-something page volume, which I started reading back in the 70s, and I read it repeatedly. I've memorized the book, basically, because his theories made so much sense to me. And he talks about the universe being made of two basic forces: contraction, squeeze your hands together, that's contraction, and expansion, release. The entire universe, everything we think, see, feel, experience, is either in a state of expansion or contraction. We vacillate between those two states. Everything you see, experience, touch, feel, think, is somewhere between those two states. And if you want a balanced life, you want a mixture of both. You can't be completely contracted, you can't be completely expanded. So we want a balance. So what happens in life, and this is just the basic theory, is that in life we try, we do, we think, we work, we worry. These are contractions, and these are very useful. We couldn't achieve anything without contracting, without building skyscrapers, without cooking a meal. These are contractions. These are the deliberate, intentional attempt to bring things together, to form something of value. So this is contraction. It's a huge part of life. It is life. The opposite is expansion, letting go, letting go, letting go, doing nothing, being empty, being open, being permeable. So we vacillate between those two states, and in life we tend to become overly contracted. We tend to overthink, we tend to overwork, we tend to overworry, and we get into a state of imbalance. So what scanning does is it basically focuses it on the opposite: expansion, relaxing, letting go. You don't want to be completely expanded. To be completely expanded is to be no longer exist, to die. When you die, you turn to dust and atoms, and those things maybe reform at some other point in the universe and form something else. So you don't want to be completely expanded. That's doing nothing to the point of extinction. We have decided, presumably, to live on this earth, to live this life, to enjoy this life, to achieve in this life. So we have contracted. We attempt to make things happen. I have a career as an actor. I'm attempting to make that happen. I work every day to put that together, to keep it together. If I gave up, I would have expanded, and I would not have any kind of career at all. So I want to have a career. I want to have a life. I have a wife and children. I want to keep those happy and together. So I work to contract a lot. But you want to balance your life by bringing expansion into your life, the opposite. Then you are at peace. You're living your life, but you also know how to let go, to open up, to be permeable, relaxed, available, calm, free of pain, free of worry, to balance the other side out. So scanning works on expansion. So we start every session the same way. First, as I said, we grip our hands together, and I recommend reading the book. A lot of it is sort of metaphysical. You may or may not like it, but the basic premise, the entire book, is expansion and contraction. So that's what we're working on here, is expansion. So we start by squeezing our hands together just to remind ourselves what it feels like to contract. This is what everything in the universe is doing at any given moment. Anything that exists in this world is a contraction. In the trees you see, the buildings, the desk I'm looking at, my hands squeezing together my thoughts. Thoughts are a very contracted process. These are contractions. So that's what it feels like. It's not a bad thing. It's strength. On the one hand, it's strength. It's a good, strong grip. They always say a man's handshake tells you a lot about him, was because he's He's decisive, or a woman. They're decisive. They know how to make things happen, to bring things together, people, objects, materials, thoughts, theories, ideas, words. That's effective. So it's good. But if you were to sit here and squeeze your hands for, let's say, a half an hour, your hands would start to be sore. Your muscles would start to ache. You'd start to realize you were limited by this position because you could only do so much when your hands are gripped together. You can't use them for anything else. So contraction has its purpose, but it also can be self-defeating. So you want to balance your life by doing the opposite. Now, on the count of 3, I'm going to have you release all the tension in your hands and take a deep breath. 3, 2, 1, and release. Let your hands drop to your sides and take a deep breath. So now you've just expanded. So we do this to kind of remind ourselves of the physical experience of this theory, contraction, expansion. We know what it feels like to contract. We know what it feels like to expand. So what we want to work on today and in these scanning sessions is expansion. We do plenty of contraction all day long, all night. I sit and lie in bed at night and worry about things. Those are contractions. Thoughts are contractions, the bringing together of words and ideas. The way I calm myself, the way I get back to sleep, is by scanning, by relaxing and letting go, and the thoughts float away. And we'll get more into that in a minute. So that's the basic premise. So let's get started. We start every session with a series of breaths. Breaths are expansive by nature. If you've ever had someone tell you, listen, you need to relax, take a breath, and you take a breath and you do feel relaxed, it's because deep breaths are expansive. Look, your lungs expand. You're letting go. You can't expand and contract at the same time. That's a basic premise of this theory. You cannot expand and contract at the same time. You can vacillate between the two. You could be heavily weighted towards contraction, but there's always you will always come back to expansion, but you can't do both at the same time. So when you take a breath, you are, in a way, coercing yourself to begin the expansive process. So we start this way. 3 deep breaths followed by 15 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Now, why stillness and silence? Stillness is the opposite of movement, activity, which is a contraction. Silence is the opposite of words, thoughts. Again, emptiness, openness. So all these are little suggestions, little prompts to get your body to begin the expansive process. So 3 deep breaths, followed by 15 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. As deep as you can. 15 seconds absolute stillness and silence. You can keep your eyes open or closed, doesn't matter. And continue to breathe. Deep breath. Now, if you're anything like me, in the course of a day, for me to stop and take 3 breaths and sit quietly is almost impossible. I'm constantly thinking, on the move, doing. I have this compulsion to contract. So part of the reason I learned this technique is I realized it was putting me out of balance. It was making me unhappy. So sometimes just the very simple act of taking a series of deep breaths and sitting in stillness and silence is enough to break the contractive cycle and to bring you into a more balanced state. So if you could do nothing else, if you take nothing else from these sessions, remember the importance of breath, stillness, and silence. Breath, stillness, and silence. So now we're going to extend that. We're going to take it further, expand further. 5 deep breaths, followed by 30 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. 5 deep breaths. Here we go. 30 seconds, absolute stillness and silence. Don't move a muscle, but continue to breathe. And take a moment. It's one of the most important phrases you could hear in scanning. Take a moment. Take a moment to feel what you are feeling. Register the change of how you feel now versus how you felt a minute ago. That feeling, that change, that sense of calm, stillness that starts to come over you is scanning. You started to balance yourself. You started to bring yourself from a contracted state into a more expanded state. It's really important to pay attention because as you begin to understand what's happening, you can revisit that place. It's like when you learn a song. Initially, you can't sing the song. You don't know the words. You don't know the melody. But as you get to know the song and practice it, it becomes more familiar till soon you can sing the song on demand. So you want to really be conscious when you're scanning of the change, the shift from contraction to expansion. We're going to do this one more time. This is the last of what I call the preliminary steps. And then we'll get into what I call the nuts and bolts of the technique, which is actual muscular release. This time we're going to take 7. I'll tell you something about scanning. As you start to expand, you start to lose consciousness of all your ideas, thoughts, and plans, which is a good thing. You start to drift. In a completely expanded state, nothing matters. You're just there. So if I lose my train of thought, you'll forgive me. As you move into a more expanded state, that's what starts to happen. So this time we're going to take 7 deep breaths, followed by a full minute, 60 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Now, if you find this difficult, as I do, it's because you are habitually contractive. I'm going to talk a lot about habit in these sessions. We have created habits. I'm 67 years old. I have created a lot of habits over the course of my life because they comfort me. We do things habitually because they're familiar. We go to them because they comfort us on some level, whether they're good for us or not. Contraction is a habit. I am habitually contracting. So it is very difficult for me to sit in stillness and silence. So what I'm doing through studying scanning, practicing scanning, is creating a new habit. Just like exercise is hard, but if you form the habit of exercise, you realize there are benefits, even if it's difficult. And now for me, exercise is a habit. I have to do it every day, even though it's difficult, because I know ultimately it benefits me. So we're trying to create a new habit, an expansive habit, and that comes through practice. 7 deep breaths, followed by a full minute, 60 seconds of absolute stillness and silence. Here we go. Last one, deep as you can. "60 seconds, absolute stillness and silence, but continue to breathe. And really try to stay absolutely still. Deep breath. And again, take a moment to just see what that feels like. In a way, we're re-educating ourselves. We become conditioned to get through our life through contraction. It's familiar, it's available. Social media completely feeds into our need to contract, to look at, to observe, to judge, to make statements, to connect. These are all contracted processes. That's why it's so valuable sometimes to put down your phone for a day and do nothing, because you'll get you back into an expanded state. So experience what that feels like, to do nothing, to be nothing, to create the new habit, an expansive habit. I always find it's interesting, and I'll make these observations, and just because maybe you will experience the same thing, how the more expanded I become, the less compulsion I feel to talk or explain or describe, which is basically a contracted process. And I like that. Again, one of the main reasons I began this process is to quiet my mind, The mind is a contractive instrument. It creates thoughts, ideas, words, worries, concerns, obsessions, and it can be very powerful. Addictions are frequently related to a need to contract, to feel, to comfort, and we've forgotten frequently. I have in my life, and I'm trying to reverse this, the benefits of the opposite of expansion. It's unfamiliar. It's frightening. It's a place of openness where we have no control, basically. We're just available and open and still and quiet. And it's unfamiliar. A state of nothingness is unfamiliar. This is why the 24/7 news cycle works, because people constantly want to know what's going on. They want to have something to hold on to. That's contractive. Expansion is the opposite, saying, I don't know. It's being willing to say, I don't know what's next. I don't know who I am, where I am, what I am. I just am. That seems to have no value, and yet it is of tremendous value. Tremendous value. For me, I've realized through the study of scanning that it is of supreme value almost. Because in that open space, in that open, empty space, anything can happen. We make ourselves available to the world. So we think we're in control. We think we're grabbing and holding and creating and hanging on to things. And to a certain extent, that's true. But there's an equally powerful way to go, and that is expansion, by saying, let's see what comes to me. Let's make ourselves available to what the universe has to offer. That's an expanded state. And again, it's important to emphasize you can't contract and expand at the same time. You can't make a fist and release a fist at the same time. So all you need to do is start down the road towards expansion, and you have stopped contracting. That's why it's useful to remind yourself that even the smallest amount of scanning, even the smallest amount of expansion or relaxation is of tremendous value. Don't ever underestimate the benefit of one single deep breath. For that moment, I wasn't contracting, I was expanding. So I've started down that road. And if you look at yourself as a continuum, you're going this way or this way. Well, if you're going this way and suddenly you start to go this way, well, then maybe you can go a little further. So practice, 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 practice. I keep a journal, the amount of hours I put into scanning as a way to motivate me. And you might do the same, but you'll find your own way. So now let's move on to what I call the nuts and bolts of the technique. We've done the preliminary. We've put ourselves into a more expanded state. And now we're going to actually do the incremental muscular release, which I mentioned at the very beginning of the session. Scanning is a relaxation technique which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension, incremental, small amounts, to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. It is cumulative, this incremental release. As you release one muscle group, it affects the others. And pretty soon, your entire body is taken over by this process, and you are in this expanded state. So we'll start small. I divided the body into what I call 8 zones. You can do whatever you like, muscle groups. And we're going to move through these parts of the body, and we're going to release muscular tension. And then we're going to do it again. We're going to cycle and cycle. What I found with scanning, and you might find you have your own experience, what I found is that it's like trying to open a door. And initially that door is stuck and it's hard and you're pushing and you don't feel anything and it's frustrating. And then suddenly the door starts to go and you feel a little motion and then you open it and it's just open. So if you feel resistance initially, that's a good sign. That means you're in a highly contracted state and you're counteracting that. Resistance is a good sign. So if you feel frustrated that this isn't working, I don't feel anything, great. That means you're really up against it. You're really up against your own contractive state. So be patient, be persistent, and practice. So we're going to start with zone 1. I'll describe the zones first. 1 is the face, 2 is the top of the head, 3 is the back of the head, 4 is the neck, 5 is the shoulders, 6 is what I call the plate of armor, the chest and stomach, 7 is down the back and into the pelvis and hips, and 8 is down the legs and into the feet. So we're just going to cycle through these. We're going to start with the face. On my count, just like you did with your fist, I want you to release every bit of muscular tension in your face. 3, 2, 1, and release. You saw my face drooped? I'd like to start with the face because you can actually look in the mirror and see it happen. You know, if you're not familiar with this process, it's kind of like, what? How do I, what? But if you look in the mirror and you go 3, 2, 1, and you can actually see it happen. 3, 2, 1, and see the muscles let go? You go kind of like a dope, right? So that's scanning. That is the sensation of release that you're looking for. And the more you do it, the more familiar you'll get with it, and the more able you will be to actually execute this release. Zone 1, the face. 3, 2, 1, and release. There you go. You can touch your face and feel it happen. Just like the fist. 3, 2, 1, release. Zone 2 is the top of the head. 3, 2, 1, and release. And frequently what I experience, and you will have your own experience, and again, we're the same as human beings, and yet we're all completely unique. So you'll have a different experience of this than I do. And I'll be honest with you, this technique works for me. It may not work at all for you. I acknowledge that. But I feel like we are similar enough as human beings that perhaps there's something to be taken from this for many people. So what I experience is like as if you cracked an egg on the top of your head and it was drooping down. You feel that sort of drooping feeling. Top of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. Very frequently, you'll feel your brow relax. I'll start with I before I say we. I tend to walk through the day holding a certain degree of tension. And you can put a score on that. Am I at a 1, which is completely relaxed, or am I at a 10, which is completely tense? And take the time during the day to gauge where you're at and see if you can move the dial. And I'm frequently surprised, astonished at how much tension I'm carrying, even when I think I'm completely relaxed. So as you start to scan, you may be surprised to find how much tension you're actually holding. That can be frightening because, as I said, letting go of tension is letting go of what we think is control. And we all want to be in control. So this can be initially uncomfortable, but as you break through, you'll see you're actually more in control when you're relaxed because you're more available. You're freer. You're more aware. Top of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. Moving to the back of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, if you feel nothing, that's because you're not familiar with this process. You're not used to it. As you practice, you'll get more and more familiar with it, and you'll begin to have more of a sense of where your musculature is at. See, muscles are a great guide. They're a great way to take yourself into an expanded state. And muscles can only do one of two things. They can either be contracted or expanded. Muscles can't think. They either contract or expand. You're either making a fist or letting go. So we use the muscles as a guide. If we can let go of our musculature, that muscular release will start to infuse our body with this sense of release, which will eventually move itself up into the mind, the brain, which is a muscle of sorts. It contracts around ideas, thoughts, it worries, and the mind will start to relax and also let go of all those ideas. They'll float away, and you'll be left in the state of emptiness and calm. So the back of the head, 3, 2, 1, and release. Moving down into the neck, 3, 2, 1, and release. Now I'm moving through these fairly quickly because I like to cover all aspects of the technique in a half an hour. When you're doing this on your own, feel free to take as much time as you like. You can just explore the tension of your neck for an hour. Just explore. 5, the shoulders, let them drop 1/4 of an inch. 3, 2, 1, and release. Take a deep breath. And see if you're starting to feel that shift. It may be very subtle, but if you've moved from, let's say, a level 9 contraction to a level 8.5, you've moved. Acknowledge that. Celebrate that. You will get better and better at this, and you become addicted to it. Once you start to see how good it feels to release that tension, to relax, to become expanded, you're going to want to do it more and more. Again, the shoulders, 3, 2, 1, and release. The chest, the stomach, and the waist, 3, 2, 1, and release. And the 3, 2, 1 is basically a way of saying, on the 3, 2, 1 on the count, pay attention to where that musculature is at. Say, here's where it's at, and I'm going to let that go. 3, 2, 1, and release. See, it's easy to contract a muscle. We do that all the time. But to release a muscle, we don't practice that much. We're not as familiar with it. But you're going to get familiar with it, and you're going to become more sensitive to and aware of the tension level in your body, and that you can master it. Chest, stomach, front of the waist, 3, 2, 1, and release. Down the back and into the pelvis, the hips, 3, 2, 1, and release. Now I always say this is a very sensitive area because it is the area of both waist elimination and sexuality. There's a lot of tension, concerns, worries in this area. So if it feels bizarre to kind of release tension there, that's natural. One of our greatest fears is to release control of those aspects of our biology. So it's worth exploring, though, because we hold so much tension there. It's a source of great contraction. And if you can get that area to release, to unclench, as it were, you can get tremendous benefits. And again, every part of your body that relaxes affects the other parts of your body. As I relax my face, my feet are down there. We haven't started on them yet, but they're aware that something's going on upstairs. And they kind of start to think about relaxing too. So you're sort of leading the charge. Again, the back down to the waist and hips, 3, 2, 1, and release. And again, the hips, pelvis, 3, 2, 1, and release. Deep breath. And finally, down the legs and into the feet, 3, 2, 1, and release. The feet are very sensitive. The feet amaze me because they are strong enough to hold anywhere from 100 to 200 pounds, 250 pounds of body and sustain balance. and work to sensitize yourself to where you're walking and so forth. They're very durable. At the same time, they're incredibly sensitive. If you've ever had someone touch your feet and you jumped, it's because, you know, the feet are incredibly sensitive. So they're this amazing instrument on the body. So they tend to carry a lot of tension because they're at work all day. They're working very hard. They're also the nerve endings of a lot of organs in our body. If you've ever had reflexology massage done, you know that a foot massage can heal the entire body. So if you can achieve a state of relaxation in your feet, you will have gone a long way towards greater health and well-being. So think about the feet now, and on my count, try to release the smallest amount of tension. 3, 2, 1, and release. 3, 2, 1, and release. And I take these moments of silence because that is an expansive process. Silence and stillness are expansive. And you're going to want to stay silent for longer and be still for longer as you move into this expanded state, because you'll start to see how good it feels. And you know, ultimately, what do we want? We want to feel good. We want to feel good or better. You know, we all have our struggles and we all have plenty of tension, and, you know, we need a break. And it's good to try to achieve that naturally without what I call chemical assists, chemical expansion. There's many ways to chemically expand: alcohol, drugs, you know, dope. These are all things people gravitate towards because instinctively we know we need to expand. We want to feel better. We know we're overly contracted, and we have no method, no technique to bring ourselves into that state on our own. So we reach for alcohol or drugs or pills, or any number of other obsessive behaviors which will help us expand. Although there are disadvantages to all of these, obviously. So if we can learn to do it on our own, not only is it healthier, but it gives you a sense of mastery over your own life. You don't feel so buffeted by the winds of life. You feel like if you get into a contracted state, you have a technique, you have a way to bring yourself out of it. But it doesn't come cheap or easy. You have to work at it. Again, the reason it's so hard is because we have created habits over the course of our lives. Habits are very, very difficult to break. If you want to create a new habit, I always say the hardest thing in the world is to change somebody. So I always say accept people for who and what they are, because it's very unlikely you will ever change them. Learn to love what they are that you love about them. The hardest thing in the world is to change somebody. We've all found our comfort zones. We've all found our techniques and our secrets and our methods for feeling better. And we're all reluctant to let go of them because they seem to work. So you're creating a new habit, and that's very difficult. Not only is it almost impossible to change anyone else, but it's very difficult to change yourself, but it can be done through practice. I recommend you practice scanning on a daily basis. So we're going to end the session now. I don't like to go longer than a half an hour. Again, I did move rather quickly through this just to cover all the bases, but I recommend you take as much time as you need whenever you have the time. Put away the video games, put down the phone, put down the book, turn off the news. Find a place where you can be still and silent and quiet and expand and see what it does for you. One last deep breath. So just to conclude again, Sqanning, spelled Sqanning, is a relaxation technique which utilizes the incremental release of muscular tension from this to this to achieve a deep state of physical, emotional, and mental calm. I will repost this session on my Facebook page, leave it up for a day or so, then I move it up to the actual Sqanning Facebook page. If you look it up, search on Facebook, Sqanning, I have more sessions, but basically every session is the same. That's one of the things I love about the technique. It's very simple. There'll never need to be a book or any lectures. This is it. You've learned it. All you have to do now is practice. So thank you for being here with me today. I end every session with rule number one. Rule number one, love yourself. Thaddeus Golis talks about love being the most expansive act you can take in life, in the universe, because it involves opening up, being available to, and embracing what is. So you have to start with yourself. If you can love yourself, and you have so much love that it's spilling out, then you can begin to truly love others and feel at peace with yourself and the world. So give it a shot. Thanks very much. We'll see you next time. Take care and have a good weekend. Bye-bye.